This is Synthesis TV, keeping you on the edge of technology and business.
Brad Sachs, Joint CEO of Capital Appreciation. Welcome to Synthesis TV. How are you doing?
I'm well, Howard. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. Very, very excited that we are now launching Synthesis TV. This is due to public demand following the success of our podcasts, and it's an absolute delight to have you joining us.
Howard, I've heard your podcast on a Sunday, and you've always said it's a good thing that you have a radio face. Now we're actually going to see a TV face.
I know it's a bit of a worry. It turns out I'm a bit of a liar as well, because here I am on Synthesis TV. Nevertheless, there's a lot that we want to talk about. Some of that is you sit as a joint CEO of Capital Appreciation. You spend a lot of your day, of course, looking at balance sheets. But I happen to know that you like to focus way beyond the numbers. And that's the conversation that I want to have with you today. Those are the insights that I'd like to get from you. When you are looking at a company and when you're looking at a possible investment, what are the things that you look for?
So, Howard, it's sort of a mosaic of different things. But what attracts you to a company at first or a prospect is the product, the idea, the notion of what it can offer. And that's where things start. But that's a very superficial item that you think about. Once you actually start the process and investigate the opportunity, there are a whole host of things. The most important, and it comes by lots of names, it's the management, the team, the leadership. Ultimately, it's the people. Because when you invest in a business, you're not investing in an entity, you're investing in the people. Because it's the people that make it work, and particularly in companies that are technology-related companies. So much of its success is based on the execution and the leadership and the innovation and the drive and determination, that it's a function of the people. So that to me is the most important item to get comfortable with. If you can't get comfortable with the people, it doesn't matter how good the potential prospects are, because you can't guarantee success. So it's the people.
Does that mean chemistry between yourself and the management, or does that mean the people in terms of how they are managing the culture of the company, or both?
Well, it's both, and it's not the relationship between me as the individual. It's the relationship amongst us as a team, as Capital Appreciation. And if it's a tuck-in acquisition for Synthesis, the Synthesis leadership team and the target team, and making sure that there's some chemistry there, because business is tough. Business has lots of events. Some are ups and some are downs. And it's not how well you do when you're doing the ups. It's how quickly you get up after you've had a down.
That's absolutely right.
It's taking assistance from people around you, and the importance of people around you in their willingness to give you assistance. And so there needs to be a sense of camaraderie where everybody is thinking that they're part of the same team. And if you don't have that chemistry, it's not going to work. So it's not a personal relationship with me necessarily, but it is a team relationship that's critically important.
Have there been companies that you've walked away from, even though you've liked what you've seen from a business perspective, but just couldn't get comfortable with the team and the management?
Absolutely.
Oh, go on. Tell us more.
Howard, those things are best left unsaid.
Well, let me ask you this. Obviously, without going into things that are too difficult to say, what are the types of red flags that you look for or that you have seen in the past?
So there are a whole host of things. One is you can do a background check on the people and get a sense as to what businesses they've been involved in the past. See if you know people in common. If you find impropriety in the books of account, that's always a red flag, because if people don't keep a tidy account of their activities, you're not quite sure that they're going to continue. Why would you change now going forward if you haven't been disciplined in the past? When you do a technology diligence and you make sure that there is lots of documentation to support decisions, housekeeping issues, it demonstrates a discipline. And while we look for people who are entrepreneurial, and entrepreneurial people aren't necessarily always the most disciplined, discipline is important. And so those are types of things that we look for.
And in terms of company culture?
Well, company culture is a very important criteria. It's a reflection of what employees often think about the leadership. And we have a very open door policy within Capital Appreciation, as we do within Synthesis in our payments businesses. And that culture is what I think drives innovation, lets people feel included in the enterprise, feel like they want to go the extra mile and put in a full effort. And so company culture is one of the things that gets back to the people, it gets back to the leadership. And so that is something that we pay a lot of attention to.
We are unfortunately running out of time, but before I let you go, if you were to give advice to anybody looking to invest in a company, what would be, beyond the balance sheet, what would be the top items that you would advise them to look for?
Well, I think you've got to believe in the product. You have to believe in the market opportunity. It's something that people often call TAM, or total addressable market. From our perspective, we always look to see whether or not there's traction, meaning that people are taking up the idea. Great ideas are often presented, but they may not get market traction. So having market traction is important. And then do your homework on the people. If it's good for us, it's the advice that I would give. It's one of those things that you can't always measure from a distance, but try your best by way of reputation and track record to determine whether or not these are people that you would give your money to and trust them to invest diligently.
Absolutely right. That's where we leave it. Brad Sachs, Joint CEO of Capital Appreciation, joining us today on Synthesis TV. Welcome back to Synthesis TV. I'm Howard Feldman. Joining me in studio is Synthesis Head of Talent, Deborah Miller. Wow.
How's it, Howie?
How's it, Deb? So it's quite a position, eh? Head of Talent. Quite the responsibility, in fact.
Yeah. So I think my little anecdote is that when I joined Synthesis, we were 60 odd individuals.
Individuals.
Yes,
yes,
absolutely.
Odd,
all
right.
odd. And some even, but mostly odd.
Right.
And I think, I'm very proud of the fact that today we are 200 odd, about 210. So
and you've recruited them all.
So a lot of our really superstar guys do come from referrals from our superstar guys, and but other than that, it's been a headhunting saga for 2.5 years to get to where we are today.
Stories that you must have. So for every how many people that you interview, do you make an offer?
Gosh, I don't have the exact conversion rates.
No one's
going to
check us on it anyway. We can make it up.
I would probably say 1 out of 10. So
okay, so that speaks to a lot of interviews.
Yeah, but that I can absolutely say with full conviction is due to our high standard, our high caliber that we require. So I mean, we interview a lot of people who are very senior at other organizations who don't even quite fit our intermediate level. So it's a good problem to have, but sometimes a problem
I get
nonetheless.
that. So it was interesting because I was doing some research on core values, and there's core values, there's aspirational values that every organization has. And the one thing that I came across, which I didn't realize, is permission to play values. And that is what gives you permission to play at Synthesis or in any organization. Every organization's got its own thing that says, right, you're through the door, you've got permission to play. What is Synthesis's permission to play value?
So I think our interview process lends itself to a lot of humor.
Okay.
And a lot of, I think from 15 minutes in, the candidate really starts to feel relaxed. I think our kind of way in which we've devised the interview process is one in which people feel like, okay, I'm chatting to other humans.
Right. There's actually a real person there.
A real person,
Yeah.
or real people that have made mistakes, real people that just, live, breathe, eat, sleep, drink, code.
Right, because we make mistakes, right?
Correct, absolutely.
You don't only hire perfect people.
No, we like the quirky ones.
Right, we do,
yeah,
don't we?
we do like
All
the
right, so
quirky
tell me
ones.
some of the horror stories. You have to have some stories. Tell me your worst interview story.
Being fully cognizant of papaya,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah, no names.
I
no
think
names, no ID numbers.
So I mean, on the plus side, we've been very lucky that we've encountered a really seamless transition during this whole remote
Okay, so far she's
working.
avoiding the question. What is that? So far you haven't gone anywhere near the question that I've actually asked you.
Right. So
Are you in
I was
politics?
getting there.
Oh, right. Okay.
So I think that the transition to remote interviews has been really well received. But there have also been some really hysterical moments, I think. Guys kind of coming in pajamas to interviews or rather not wanting to turn on their cameras because they're...
In an interview?
Absolutely. They're, at 11 o'clock in the morning saying, well, I'm still in my nightgown, so I'm not going to turn on my camera.
Wow.
So I think it's safe to say those kinds of guys, didn't really
Thanks.
take it seriously
Yeah.
enough
No
for us.
permission
I
to
mean,
play. Yeah.
correct. I mean, we absolutely encourage play hard, but
Of
you
course.
still got to
Get dressed.
Correct.
Right, for an
Get
interview,
dressed.
if you are going to be interviewed.
At least from the top up.
100%. You're not doing full body scans.
No, absolutely. It's
Right.
imperative that you are professionally dressed from the top up.
And that you know to turn the camera on.
Well, yes. I think a lot of people don't know that.
No, seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, these are novel kind of times, right?
But that's interesting because you've been in this field for a while. I mean,
11
you're
years.
pretty
Thanks,
much an
Howie.
expert. I wasn't
Yeah.
calling you old, I was
Salt in
calling
the
you
wound.
experienced. It is quite different. You're like a wine, you know. Well, I'm not doing myself any favors, but you've seen this transition of this world. You've also, and it was actually quite interesting because you and I had a conversation off air, which was fascinating, that when we were talking about work models, hybrid work models, remote working, office working, and whereas, for example, we were looking at this hybrid model, you stood up and said, no, you don't, because every candidate that I'm seeing wants complete freedom. So you're very much at the cutting edge
Absolutely.
of what is actually happening
Sure.
out there. Can you expand on that a
Sure.
little bit?
I mean, sometimes I think to myself that it's so mad that us as human beings are living in this time, that we're almost, I mean, it sounds crazy, but we're almost fortunate to witness the change and the transitions that are happening. But I think number one question is generally always going to be remuneration. And number two is the hybrid or office-based or fully remote. We're seeing a massive, appetite to work from home. And I think people just feel that, it's silly. It's silly to arrive, stuck in traffic, being stuck in traffic for 3 hours and arrive at work being tired. And rather
Do you think
just,
that's particular, though, to the tech space, more so in the tech
I
space?
think so, because, for the most part, we're dealing with individuals who are inclined to be more introverted. And that's by no means a negative thing. It's
I
the
wouldn't
nature
judge
of
anybody like that.
it's the nature of the individual. And I think, therefore, there's less of a need to have that constant engagement with others. And
Right. That said, the flip side of it must be, from a recruiter's perspective, a little bit of fear that there's less stickiness because you form less relationships when you're sitting at home in your own lounge. And whether you're working for company A or B, obviously is less relevant, even though culture is absolutely vital.
So I can only really speak from my own experience. So I was at Synthesis for 6 months before the pandemic struck. And
No coincidence, right?
my boss, our ops director, likes to joke that I've been with the company for 2.5 years, but I've only come to the office for 6 months. And I think for me personally, I've been able to develop relationships because people are far more accessible. So before you'd walk into an office and you'd see people behind closed doors in meetings, and you wouldn't necessarily get a chance to, strike up a conversation, build the relationship. And now you're a Teams ping away from that
So that's
conversation.
interesting. So that is the other side of it. People are more
Absolutely.
accessible.
Absolutely.
And you've got to make more of an effort.
You have to make more of an effort, but generally, I think people are just more accessible. It's, and when you do see them in the office, it's like a quick hi-bye, but it's far easier to have more kind of meaningful conversations when someone's got more time because that their time is more freed up now, and they're more accessible.
I've got so many more questions, and now we are running out of time. But what I'm fascinated about is I would also imagine that a recruiter's role, your role, has changed because of this. Whereas in the past, you might have recruited somebody, they become part of the organization and you walk away. Now, you're the person that has actually developed a relationship with that person through this interview process. So to some extent, that puts you in quite a different position within an organization, almost that you are a relationship. You don't quite sit in a normal traditional HR role, but actually you're part of that. Have you seen a change?
I think it's always been the case that because I'm the first kind of port of call or relationship kind of built, that people have kind of gravitated to me to discuss things where needed. But that being said, I mean, we have a very competent, very vocal HR team. And so I don't feel the need to really invest in that individual's career to the extent that HR would.
Right.
However, that being said, the relationships are always built from day one of the person commencing, and that's so special to me. And I like to think of them as my devourers, my little bees.
And that's where we leave it. Deborah Miller, who is the head of talent at Synthesis Software. Thank you for joining us in studio.
Thank you, Howie.
Brad Sachs, joint CEO of Capital Appreciation. One of the conversations that we've often had is your belief and your passion, actually, that technology can bridge the poverty gap, education gap, and change lives in Africa. Can I ask you to talk to that, please?
Yeah, Howard, I think technology has the ability to dramatically transform people's existence, particularly those that are less fortunate economically and socially. Good examples of that relate to GovChat. GovChat is an enterprise that Synthesis has developed the platform for, and it is based on AWS, and it uses lots of different digital channels to engage with citizens. Now, where it has been most applied is for the SRD grants, the social relief of distress grants, for many of South Africans most impoverished, a 350 Rand a month grant. And you can imagine that people who need to afford themselves the access to that are not the most technologically savvy and don't have the latest equipment. However, there have been millions, almost 13 million people who have applied for an SRD grant on the GovChat technology platform. And so GovChat uses the WhatsApp channel, which is a very simple messaging platform that is ubiquitously available. It uses a PWA, which stands for a progressive web app, which effectively emulates a traditional app, but doesn't require it to be already downloaded. And that's a limitation that affects many emerging markets where phone capacity is insufficient, network speeds are insufficient. And so the PWA provides a simulated environment of an app. And in those instances, 13 million impoverished South Africans have applied for SRD grants through GovChat. They can do it from where they are, when they're ready to do it, taking technology to people where they are. That's fundamentally what it's about. A fantastic solution and an example of how technology has materially helped. The alternative was for each of these applicants to go to a Department of Social Development office and have to stand in line. Often the queues are hours long.
And during COVID, dangerous as well.
During COVID, particularly, fill out an application form, then be told, well, maybe you didn't bring a supporting document with you, and so you'd have to go home. These offices are not necessarily always in the rural areas where the applicant lives. And so it's a very complicated process. Digital engagement solves that problem and saves enormous amounts of time and saves enormous amounts of money. You also then avoid the fat finger problem, which is people have to input the data from a handwritten form into a computer where there are lots of input errors. And so a mismanagement of an ID number or a name or an address leads to a delay in processing the application. Allowing you to do it digitally has the recipient take responsibility for ensuring its correctness. And that streamlines the process as well. So that's a great example of how technology can materially benefit people across emerging markets.
Talk to us about Layup. What is Layup?
So Layup's a great company. Layup's actually a really good example of a company we invested in because of the people. The leadership of Layup is a great team, very enthusiastic, very energetic, has real conviction about what he's doing. And Layup is a digitalized lay-by service. So we think historically, if you couldn't afford to buy a large product, let's say a piece of furniture, you would go into a store, you would say, I want to buy that bed, and here's my down payment. Over the course of the next number of months, you would have to go into the store and make cash payments until you paid the entire principal amount that you owed. And that would require lots of travel, lots of time. And there would be accounting issues, there would be reservation issues, there would be reconciliation issues, and there would be relatively lower levels of completion. Once we've digitalized it, the purchaser, the consumer, is able to make a payment for that lay-by at any time, at any place where they are, and has a full record of how much they've paid, how much they still have to pay. And the merchant has an ability to engage with the consumer. There is a concept which has been bandied about called buy now, pay later, which is a euphemism in my mind for credit. So we all know about micro-lending, we know about microcredit, we know how consumers get overextended, and that's buy now, pay later. Layup is the exact opposite of that. It is responsible consumer behavior. It's effectively save now, pay later. You effectively save in advance of the purchase. And if you can't complete the purchase because you've overextended yourself, you get the amount of money that you've deposited into the account back.
Amazing.
And so you can't overextend yourself. It is a very responsible way of thinking about credit. And the team at Layup are doing a phenomenal job.
The other one, of course, within the capital appreciation stable is Halo, where vendors across who wouldn't have had access necessarily to a traditional point of sale can now turn their handheld device into such an item, allowing them to transact, not have to deal in cash where it's perhaps a little bit dangerous, and empower people in that way.
Howard, you have the responsibility of being the head of people, but I think there's an opening in sales for you. There is no doubt. Halo's another great example. And think about what that does. If people can get their funds into an account promptly, they get the benefit of being able to earn interest promptly. Right. And being able to access traditional financial services promptly. And while you may say, well, a small amount of interest on a day balance while interest rates are so low are not important, it's the principle, number one, and every little amount counts.
Absolutely.
If people then can transact digitally, let's think about the credit card that you use most frequently. I'll hazard a guess. It's a card that generates air miles, and you then use that for purposes of your travel. Well, that's a great benefit, but I would also hazard a guess that you could afford to pay for your airline ticket, even if you never had those miles. Whereas think about somebody who's less financially secure. If they would get some type of economic benefit that they could apply against their monthly staples, be it bread or milli meal or coffee or milk or whatever it might be, each little benefit has a marked impact on their life. That's a financial service. It may not be a traditional financial service as you and I think about it, insurance or mortgages, but it is a financial service. And making that available to anybody and everybody is where the power of technology lies.
Absolutely right. Brad Sachs, joint CEO of Capital Appreciation, talking to us about the empowerment, technology empowering people across the continent.